Hello, I'm Lucy, and welcome to Cracking the Cryptic. In this video, I'll be sharing how Return of the Pentominoes Odds was constructed, starting with the history of the idea. Like many others, I got into setting Sudoku thanks to this channel. My mom had introduced me to classic Sudoku when I was young, but despite my love for numbers and patterns, it didn't keep my attention for very long. But when I learned about the wonderful possibilities of Sudoku variants, in early 2020 thanks to this channel, I was instantly hooked. I've always been a creator, and setting Sudoku turned out to be just the outlet I needed for my creativity during the stress of the pandemic. I made a few classic puzzles to get familiar with the process and the geometry of valid grids. Then I started having other ideas. One of the earliest, inspired by various parody and tetromino puzzles that have been done on the channel, was Tetris Evens, where the even digits in each box form either an L, a T, or an S tetromino shape. As I was making this, I wondered if I could do the same thing with odd digits in pentominoes. I called my first attempt Jigsaw Oddity, not knowing at the time that jigsaw was a nickname for irregular regions. I gave up on fitting all the odd digits into 9 pentominoes because I tried for a while and started to suspect it might not be possible. I settled for marking odd digits in boxes 3 and 7, and giving the solver a specific list of 6 unique pentominoes to use in the remaining boxes. A few months later, I brought up the challenge on the Discord server, and someone else figured out how to make a valid layout of 9 pentominoes that could contain all the odd digits. I studied the result and realized that the trick is fitting in the 3-cell runs that exist in most of the usable pentominoes, without splitting the odds in another box down the middle. Once I understood that, I was able to piece together a valid layout of 9 pentominoes pretty quickly. I made pentominoes odds with pentominoes in 8 boxes, still exploring the possibilities of the constraint. Pentominoes odds 2 finally has 9 pentominoes, as well as the additional requirement that all 9 connect together orthogonally. The next puzzle, the 5th in the series, is Pentominous V. It's another easy one I made when I discovered a valid arrangement that uses 7 of the 8 pentominoes that can fit in a 3x3 box. I still haven't managed to fit all 8 in one puzzle. The X is particularly problematic due to having 2 3-cell runs in the middle of the box. The 3-cell runs of the V are much easier to incorporate because they're on the edge of a box and can be paired up with another V in the opposite orientation. After I made Pentominous V, there was a several-month break where I didn't make any more of these. During that time, however, I made Tetris Sudoku, one of my favorite constructions. In this puzzle, the entire grid is filled with tetrominoes, and they act as cages that can't contain repeated digits. In addition, every single given digit is the number of tetrominoes that are orthogonally touching the one containing the digit. Now that the backstory is in place, we can start looking at the construction of the puzzle. I'm running this screen capture at 10 times actual speed. I started with this layout of pentominoes, a modified version of the layout in Pentominous V. My initial idea was to combine the pentominoes odds with the idea of Tetris Sudoku for a triple-layer puzzle, which is why I started by filling all but one square of the grid with pentomino cages. I do want to develop a version of this idea in the future, as I think it could produce some awesome mind-bending logic. But I quickly realized that the possible number of orthogonally touching pentominoes is much more constrained than tetrominoes, and it looks completely impossible to do the trick with given digits like in Tetris Sudoku. I abandoned the extra layer of cages pretty quickly. The opening was pretty straightforward. I really liked how the 2s and 4s could immediately place 3 of the odd cells in boxes 3 and 7, and I thought that was a great start for doing interesting things in box 9 later. I usually have a second window open where I run the solver. This is mostly so I don't miss any basic Sudoku. It also comes in handy for exploring multiple possible paths or finding out if a clue is going to break something more quickly than solving it out yourself every time. There's some variants, of course, where you have to deal with the logic yourself, like with the pentominoes. The solver isn't going to do that, but I find it really helpful to keep on top of the regular Sudoku. Here's where I added the circle, which is going to become redundant pretty soon here after I add the 5 in row 6, but I'm too focused on the logic I'm building up to notice that. This isn't as big of a deal as removing a clue and accidentally keeping its logic when continuing to set the puzzle, or adding a later clue that gives an easy shortcut around earlier logic. But I still like my puzzles to have only necessary clues, so I've removed that circle in the final version. I'm going to jump up to 30 times speed here, so every minute of footage is half an hour. I cut out about an hour of footage here. I was just exploring a lot of possibilities and ended up putting in thermometers and came back to it the next day to just start fresh and add the inequality signs as I found a use for them. The thing I really liked about putting the given 7 in box 7 is that it forced the 2 remaining odd cells in box 9 that we're still looking for to be 5 and 9. And then it also removes 7 from row 9, column 6, which means the 5, 9 can't go in row 9 in box 9, and that finishes the pentominos. Obviously, Simon found a different way through, but I really like that logic. I was trying really hard to find a single clue that would give me a lot of digits at the end while also finishing off the pentominos. I ended up not finding anything really ideal, but that inequality sign in column 1 turned out to be the key to making a ending that I was happy with. Before I go, I want to talk about another puzzle of mine that Simon solved. I think it was the first one of mine on the channel this year. Because not all puzzles are created in the same way. Sometimes they're more of a discovery than a creation. In this case, I was not sober, and I decided to draw insects in the grid. And I wanted to draw a spider, so I started with this, what Simon called the large, unpleasant body of the spider. 9-cell Thermo. Not a very advanced start for Thermo Sudoku, but I was just drawing insects. I didn't care. So I started adding some legs, like this. Oops. And like that. Now the fun thing about this is because of the one that's forced into the 9-cell thermometer, 1, 2, and 3 end up excluded from all of these and forming a triple here. So I thought that was a good start. I added the other legs. I had identical legs on the other side. And I was expecting this to break. So I ran the solver to see if it was broken. And to my surprise, it was not. So from here, I realized, well, my spider needed some mouth parts, and I realized that if you put them in like that, these two become a 1-2 pair. So I hit the solver again, and suddenly it was almost all solved. So I tried to add something to the spider that would preserve the symmetry and finish solving the puzzle, but I couldn't think of something. So I decided to resort to a single ratio dot, and this seemed like a good place to put it that wouldn't be disambiguated too early. So then I just ran through the solve on my own and found it was actually a decent puzzle, and I was kind of surprised it ended up on the channel, but it is visually striking, I suppose. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that you don't have to be an absolute genius to make something interesting. You just have to know what to look for, and you can make a discovery.